The Alabama Crimson Tide held their first scrimmage yesterday, and afterwards, Nick Saban gave us some very interesting tidbits that we need to get into, including a quarterback who is very impressive, some freshmen who are really starting to show out, and a defensive front that got upwards of 15 sacks, which begs the question, should we have concerns at offensive line? And we are going to get into all of that here in a bit. But before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from y'all. So hop down to the comments and give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Are you excited with where Saban said the team is at relative to their first spring scrimmage? And let me know what you're thinking based off of everything you heard from Saban and also at the end of this video. And if you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification because I do constant college football content, player reviews, film analysis, talk style videos like this. And I'm on my push to 5,000 subscribers in my first year, and I'd love to have you along for the journey. And if you did enjoy this video, be sure to like and comment down below because those interactions really do go a long ways in helping content creators like myself get picked up by the YouTube algorithm. But with all that being said and out the way, let's talk about the scrimmage, and we're going to kick it off with what I said there at the end of the intro. Should we have concerns about the offensive line? And in a very roundabout way, no, not yet. And let me explain why, and I have a few reasons. First and foremost, inexperience. This is an offensive line who I talked about could be a very, very talented unit. I have no doubt in the talent of this unit. However, if we look at it circumstantially, right now you have Evan Neal with experience, you have Chris Owens with experience, but outside of that, you really don't have a whole lot of experience on this offensive line. Emil Ekiyor, a guy who we think and we expect to be a starting piece of this offensive line because he's just been phenomenal throughout his career at Alabama, he's not able to go during the spring right now. And then Pierce Quick, a guy who may not have started but has plenty of great experience, also super limited. And so when I hear that there's 15 sacks, that is alarming. That's not a good thing. You never want that. But my first thing is that's a very inexperienced Tide offensive line right now, aside from one or two positions, but the vast majority of it very inexperienced. My second reaction, that's a very experienced defensive front seven for Alabama. So the exact opposite take I had for the offensive line. Look, there's a possibility that you asked a true freshman in Tommy Brockermeyer or J.C. Latham to guard Will Anderson. A guy who's been in college for years can't guard Will Anderson. He's a freak, right? Like, that guy is so unbelievably talented that it's not surprising to me that if Alabama, because of guys not being able to participate in spring, because they're trying to get some guys some reps, they put a new guy out there against Will Anderson. Will Anderson's going to eat. And that's not an indication that that offensive lineman isn't incredible. That's an indication that you put him against one of the scariest pass rushers in all of college football who has a year of experience under his belt against a guy that doesn't. And my third and final reason is something that Nick Saban said that I thought was brilliant, that over the past few days, they've given these offensive linemen a lot of new sets. And because of that, it's probably very confusing. And he even said, and I quote, their heads were probably swimming, meaning there was a ton of information they were given, and that's to be expected. But also Saban made an interesting point that I don't think a lot of people really talk about when it comes to an inexperienced offensive line. Not only was the Alabama offensive line learning on the fly, right, because they're inexperienced, they had to learn the offense, but now they're having to see what a defense is doing in front of them, and it just so happens that on that defense in front of them is Christian Harris, Will Anderson, Chris Allen, and a ton of talented interior guys. That's no laughing matter. I'm not surprised that the defensive front got the best of the Alabama offensive line. And the last thing is we don't know if that was the bulk of that coming against the first team offensive line, the second team offensive line. And the reason I bring that up is because Saban did say the second team offensive line does need some work. But outside of that, I don't think that there are any concerns at offensive line for the Crimson Tide. Is there a ways to go? Sure. But this is a very, very talented group that just had to go up against a group that has a ton of experience and a ton of talent. The second thing was the quarterbacks. Now, from what we've heard, Bryce Young was phenomenal, just carving up defenses. He apparently had upwards of 4 touchdowns in the scrimmage, 2 of them coming against the first team, and had a lot of explosive plays from what I'm hearing. Some big plays to Slade Bolden, Cameron Latude, Javon Baker, and Xavier Williams. So good to see Bryce Young getting in there and spreading it out. And we did also hear that on the defensive side, DeMarco Hellams did return a pick 6 from Paul Tyson. Paul Tyson working with the second team unit. Saban said the second team did need to improve, but y'all understand something. This quarterback battle is nowhere near done. This is the first scrimmage. This is just a test, a teaser, if you will. Paul Tyson could come back in the second scrimmage and do much better, and he's right back on Bryce's heels, and I expect he's still there, no doubt about it. Paul Tyson's an incredibly talented guy, but y'all already know how I feel about Bryce. I think the job is his to lose. The reason why I'm not too concerned about Paul throwing that pick six is because Saban said the second team offensive line did need some work. It's kind of hard to tell how much of that pick six was on Paul, how much of that was on bad pressure getting to him, and just the pocket breaking down. We don't know. And so because of that, I will put a little asterisk next to it, but I will still think about it. Paul Tyson's incredibly talented. This quarterback battle nowhere near being done, but it is good to hear that Nick Saban continues to pour over Bryce Young. And Nick Saban also said some very interesting things about the team as a whole, saying that he was pleased with the intensity, which you have to be pleased with that coming off of the first scrimmage because Nick is very honest. He said before, I'm not pleased with the intensity on teams that I felt like had more clear-cut leadership than this team. Because as much as experience specifically on defense and as much talent as I think this team returns, a lot of the leadership on this team ended up going to the draft. Barmore, Moses, Surtain, Smitty, Waddle, and Mac Jones, plus Najee Harris and Alex Leatherwood, Landon Dickerson. Y'all get my point. The Crimson Tide still head-spinningly talented, but the leadership at large, some of the best leadership you can imagine, all those guys I just named, you're sitting there thinking, man, all those guys were on that same squad as leaders. Now they're not. It's impressive that the Tide comes out with a first scrimmage that Saban is pleased with the intensity, and for the most part, he said that he thought that they were in a very good place for the first scrimmage. A ton to work on. Make no mistake, the work is never finished. There's always room to improve, and I'm not saying that we need to get complacent because you can't give up 15 sacks. The offensive line needs to shore up. But for the first scrimmage, it is sounding like the Crimson Tide looks to be very, very good this year, and a lot of really intriguing pieces. It's always great to hear how much Bryce has improved, his confidence, and I think that even bigger than the explosive plays Saban said he had was his ability to just take what the defense gave him and control. That was very impressive. Talking about some true freshmen we've heard about making some waves. We heard that JaQuincy McKinstry is starting to get some reps with the first team. How much, I don't know, but he is really competing with Armour Davis at that first team corner position. Now, Saban did say afterwards that he is still young, right? Like, he's very talented, but he does still need to kind of figure out what he needs to do on every play, which that right there is not surprising to me. If he had already figured out what he was supposed to do within a few months of learning that Crimson Tide defense, this kid would be a problem for all of college football, and we would have a potential shutdown corner day one in the SEC. The fact that he's not there yet isn't surprising, right? That would be incredibly surprising if he was there. I think JaQuincy McKinstry, y'all heard the video I talked about when I talked about which freshman I think could contribute. My guy was McKinstry, and the reason is when I watch him, every time I watch his tape, I'm more impressed than the time before. I really, truly believe he could have been a 5-star receiver. He has some of the best ball skills I've seen from a receiver or a cornerback for quite some time. He's incredibly talented, and it is surprising to hear that he's already working with some of the first-team reps, but at the same time, it's not all that surprising. I think Armour Davis is still out in the lead, and there's a lot of other good guys to take that position, but JaQuincy McKinstry is a name we need to watch. Now, before I wrap this up, I just want to talk a little bit about the wide receivers. And the wide receiver room looks to be needing improvement still, but looks to be a talented group, which we've talked about. Agiye Hall has been hyper impressive. Apparently, Ja'Cory Brooks got involved yesterday. Love to hear that. We didn't hear much about Christian Leary, which is interesting considering how much we heard about him leading up to this. But we didn't hear much about him yesterday, not to say that he didn't do anything. He's going to be a problem, though, out of that slot. Slade Bolden apparently was very impressive. Good to hear. But Javon Baker and Xavier Williams apparently made some very big plays, and the tight end position has now Cameron Latou emerging, and that's going to be hyper impressive. Y'all, go back and watch Bill O'Brien's tape at Penn State and see how he utilized the tight end. The tight ends for the Crimson Tide this year are very athletic, very dangerous, especially Jaleel Billingsley. And I'm not taking anything away from Cameron Latou, but Billingsley is a receiver in a tight end's body. and Bill O'Brien really loves to utilize them. But I cannot wait to hear what y'all are thinking based off of everything Saban said. And look, right now, I think we have to be very pleased with where the first team defense is. A ton of continuity there, 8 starters returning there, and the guys who are going to be coming and nipping at the heels, such as a Jalen Moody, who started next to Christian Harris yesterday in that scrimmage, is a very talented and capable guy. Barmore along that front, it's going to be a big loss. A lot of talented guys there. And then Surtain in the back, that's going to be a really hard loss to mitigate. But the Crimson Tide did such a good job over the past 2 years of recruiting DBs. Kyrie Jackson, Malachi Moore, Brian Branch, DeQuincy McKinstry. The list goes on and on and on. So you have to really like where they are right now. And I'm very pleased to hear that Bryce Young is looking really good. And he has so far very much well impressed Saban, because Saban has been very complimentary of Bryce. So with all that being said, hop down to the comments. Let me know what you're thinking after the first scrimmage, and what are you looking for in the second scrimmage. Can't wait to hear from y'all. And that's it. See ya.